That's
I just turned the recording on just so I didn't forget to do that. We do have 8 people in the room now. And Nuria just wrote she's fine with remaining in the attendee room versus
okay. So I think it's your call, Sam. Do you want to wait a few more minutes and then we'll, or another minute or two?
Yeah, let's give it till 7:40 and then we can certainly get started.
And will you crop this video? Is that what you'll do then?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to leave the slides up or should I take them down after I do my little intro?
I'm fine either way. If you do remove it, whoever is speaking at that moment, their image should enlarge. And that way it brings the focus to the panelists versus the
With the slides. So I think I'll do that. I do have a thank you slide at the end, but whether or not I pop that back up is probably, we'll see how things go.
Perfect.
Can you communicate with the people that are waiting to tell them that we're about to start, that kind of thing, Sam?
Yeah, I will. Everyone should hear that, but I'll go ahead and send a chat as well. Sorry for the humming. It's the fan on my computer. I'm not sure if that's distracting to anyone. So I will, once we get started, I will send out the bio list to everyone just to make sure that as people are coming in, they're able to get that. I'm going to send it a few times because anybody that arrives after sending that won't be able to say that or won't be able to see that. Sorry. So I'll send it just a few times just to make sure that anyone that's coming in late, we can make sure that they're getting that.
Any of you, none of you on the panel were wanting to show a slide? Okay, that usually doesn't happen, but it's always worth it to ask. So just in case somebody had something. So we're ready to go, Sam? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to welcome all of you to the 12th annual Women in Science Alumni Career Panel event. My name is Teresa Larkin, and I'm an associate professor of physics education and director of the dual degree combined plan engineering program that AU has an affiliation with Columbia University. I also serve as a co-advisor to a couple of student organizations, Women in Science and Society of Physics students. And it's a real honor for me to be one of the co-moderators for this important event this evening. We've assembled a great panel of alumni, but before we introduce and all of that, I just want to provide some welcome remarks. And I want to remind everybody that this event is being recorded, and for anybody that maybe wanted to be here but couldn't, it will be located on the Career Center's YouTube channel. And those of you that are participating, you're welcome at any time to submit questions via the Q&A feature in the ribbon on the Zoom panel. We've assembled a really great panel of alumni who received at least one STEM major and/or minor at AU. We've invited them to this platform today to provide helpful suggestions and offer advice to you, our current students here at AU in the sciences. We hope that the dialogue that we begin today will serve to provide you with some advice and useful information as you go forward on your own career paths. The alumni that have taken time out of their own schedules to join us today include Shamsa El-Adawy, Cathy Furlong, Flaherty, and Irena King. I'd also like to start with a few thank yous. First, I want to thank Sam Mitchell from the Career Center for her help with this event. We certainly couldn't have done this without you. I'd also like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences Dean Max Paul Friedman and Associate Dean Nuria Villanova, who is here tonight to support this important event, for their support of Women in Science in our annual career panel event. Other amazing individuals in our AU Career Center also merit a thank you, including Nathan Slusher, Anna Littman, who's here, Marie Spalding, Linda Golden, and again, Sam Mitchell. You guys are just fantastic, and we love you. And I thank you for your continued and tireless efforts to assist our students, including our undergraduate and grad students, as well as recent graduates, as they navigate from the academic world to the next phase of their professional careers. One goal of this panel is to learn about the experiences of our alums as they traverse their academic as well as their professional STEM careers. It's our hope that these shared experiences will provide encouragement to our current undergraduate and grad students in STEM. An additional goal of tonight's event is about making important connections and networking. And one of the things that I've learned, having spent over 25 years of my career at American University, is that our alumni really understand the importance of making and keeping professional connections. They stay in touch with their faculty members and are always willing to give of their time to help current students. That's what being an AU alum is, a part of what being an AU alum is about. So making these kind of connections, I think, especially in light of what the last 2 years have been like with COVID and all of that, is really, really important. And I just like to say that, you know, we need to come together, and I think even now more so than ever. And to me, this speaks volumes that we're stronger together. It's through events such as this one that I'm always reminded of the true sense of community that forms the backbone of everything we do to embrace one another and live the message of equity and inclusion as members of the AU community. Before we begin, I'd like to outline the format for our event tonight. So this short welcome, actually less than 5 minutes, and I'm going to be turning things over to our Women in Science co-president, Mia Fanuzzi, in just a moment, who's going to ask the alumni to speak for 1 to 2 minutes to introduce themselves. And then Mia is going to ask panelists questions from a list that they have been sent, some questions prepared by the Career Center. We'll spend maybe about 30 minutes or so on those questions, and then we'll have Q&A questions from the audience during the last half hour of this session. So it's important, if you think of a question while one of the alumni is speaking, please put it into the chat, and our Women in Science Events Coordinator, Talia will take over and handle those questions that come from the audience. So we'll do that at the end. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to the student officers, starting with Mia, who's going to lead things off. So I'm glad everybody's here, and I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. So we can start off by having the panelists introduce themselves and just tell us briefly about your current position. So maybe Shams, you can start and then pass it along to the next person.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today. WIS is very dear to my heart. It was one of my favorite student organizations that I was a part of at American. So I'm honored to be here today. So I'm Shamsa Saladawi. I graduated from American in 2018. I was a physics and French major. After that, I went on to do my master's in physics at DePaul University in Chicago. And then after that, I went on to start sort of my PhD, which I'm currently doing at Kansas State University. And I'm doing it in physics education research. And my research focuses on the professional development of physicists, the physics faculty, and STEM faculty. And I'm happy to talk more about that if anybody's interested. And yeah, I think, so I'm a grad student still in academia, and happy to talk about sort of the grad school path if that's of interest to anybody here tonight. Yeah, I'm going to pass it along to Kira.
Hi, I'm Kira Flaherty. It's great to be with everyone here. I graduated from American in 2018, and I studied biology while I was there. I went to grad school to get my master's in bioethics and medical humanities from Case Western. I actually just finished that last year. And then I started full-time with a health policy lobbying firm right here in DC. And we work with physician groups, patient advocacy groups, and also medical schools and medical institutional organizations. And I became interested in health policy through my master's program and how it influences healthcare. So excited to talk about those things with you all. And I'll pass it on to Cathy.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me. This is, I believe, the second time I've been on this panel, and I really enjoy it. I am one who, you will see that my background is completely different from others. A lot of people, I'm in the area of statistics. I completed my master's degree in statistics at AU in 2006. But my background is that I actually taught, after my bachelor's degree, I taught, then got my first master's degree in philosophy and religion, then did my second master's degree in statistics, left teaching, became a statistician for a private company that did Medicare, Medicaid fraud investigation. I left that, and I actually spend most of my time now volunteering. And I personally have found that that crooked path has really helped me a lot in gaining a wide range of skills and understanding. So I call myself, I am a generalist, but I have found that being a generalist has helped me a lot in my career. And I look forward to answering any questions people have. Oh, the next person, Anna, are you the next?
Irena.
Irena, sorry.
No worries. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Irena King. I graduated from AU in 2019 with my bachelor's in neuroscience and then an individualized minor in bioentrepreneurship. I'm now in a PhD program between MIT and Harvard Medical, studying medical engineering and brain and cognitive sciences. My research focuses on primarily vaccine development. And my specialty is neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, so vaccine for Alzheimer's. And while I was at AU, I also started a company, Surgicure Technologies. And so I am still running that company. We're actually in our Series A round going into clinical trials next month. So really happy to talk to anyone about, the connection or the bridge between academia and industry and how both can work hand in hand.
Thank you, everyone. So we can start off with the first question. As we know, the pandemic has greatly impacted almost every aspect of our lives, especially our professional lives. So how has the pandemic impacted your career or your job search? How did you organize your job search during the pandemic? Where did you begin? How did you network, online and everything? So anyone can just jump in. Feel free to unmute yourself.
So I can start. I was in grad school during the pandemic, so I'm sure other people in PhD programs can relate, but originally an in-person program had to go all online. So that was a bit of a shift. It was really isolating in a lot of ways, and I felt like I couldn't network and connect with professors in the traditional way that I would, showing up to office hours or things like that. But once I got over that discomfort, I realized that Zoom actually allows you to connect with so many more people from the convenience of your home. So that's what I started doing. I just started reaching out to professors that I had, professors that I particularly liked or connected with before, and just started talking to them, because during my master's program, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew I had interests in health policy, but also health policy ethics, bioethics, public health. So I figured the best way to figure it out was just talk to people. So I met with a bunch of professors who eventually, one professor had a connection to a person who worked on Capitol Hill because they happened to work on Capitol Hill early on in their career. And that person connected me to another person who connected me to another person, which is how I landed this job. So networking was huge for me. I didn't really do the typical application process at all, and was able to connect to the right people while I was still in my grad program. So in this virtual world, I would say just, send the email. Professors or even corporate or leaders, they're always willing to talk to people. That's what I found. It's rare that you get someone who says, no, I don't want to meet with you. So I encourage networking for sure.
I can follow up from Kara. Kara, you really just let in. I do. So I said I did a lot of volunteer work, and some of my volunteer is through the American Statistical Association. Some of it is through the Washington Statistical Society. And with some of them, I mentor. And so the younger people that I mentor are exactly at that particular spot that you were talking about, and saying, so where did they want to go and what did they want to do? Well, I have done a lot of networking, and I fully agree. Networking is so important, just talking to people. So when I would talk to my mentees and I would start hearing the questions that they had and what they were searching for, I actually had an idea of people that they could contact and suggested a lot of additional interviews. And you're correct. There are so many people who have been so successful who they would love to talk to people about how did they get there? What did they do? What do they suggest? And so I do find with the pandemic, Zoom was just wonderful. The ability to actually talk face to face with people and to have their time, it works so well. So it's great to hear that we, coming from two different views, had exactly the same methodology.
So for me, things got super, super busy during the pandemic. All of Boston turned towards who was going to be the first person to find the cure to COVID, my lab included. And if anyone's familiar, I'm in Dr. Dan Baruch's lab, and they were responsible for the J&J COVID vaccine, as well as the comparative studies between the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. So as you can imagine, everyone else's research was put on hold, and everyone had to learn how to handle the COVID virus and study it and try to find the vaccine for it. And so while I found that some of my other classmates couldn't get into lab at all, everything got shut down, I was actually in the lab 24/7. So things got busy on that front. And then from my company's point of view, our first project was actually an intubation assistance device. And so before the pandemic, it was really difficult to convey the problems around intubation and ventilation to people. And when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, everyone knew what intubation was. I didn't have to explain it to everyone. Everyone knew the issues behind it. And so again, things really ramped up. People were interested in speaking to us. People were interested in funding us, running trials. And for me, I knew that this was going to be the make or break it moment of my startup. This is what was really setting startups apart from each other, of who could actually create those networks, who could find the opportunities when everything was shut down. And, some people were willing to answer the phone, others were, busy or frightened or, whatever it may be. And so from the other point of view than what's already been said, I really appreciated the people that just reached out to me and cold called me and said, how can we help? Looking for a job, looking for an internship, because I was in a position where we're taking anyone. We were already working remotely, and so that wasn't a huge transition for us, but it was just amazing to see the amount of talent that came through, the amount of willingness for people to just help where they could. And so, just echoing what everyone else says, definitely don't be afraid to cold call people, to step out of your comfort zone, even if something that you're not familiar with or don't have experience in. I definitely appreciate it. I know that a lot of clinicians and scientists also appreciated that help and outreach as well.
I don't think I have much to add after all of these responses, but because I think the one thing that I've noticed over the last 2 years that COVID sort of did is normalized this idea of reaching out to people you don't know. I think in the last 2 years, I've talked to a lot more people that I've ever had, that I wouldn't even have thought of or reached out to if it wasn't sort of this idea of just emailing someone, I'm interested in what you're doing, can you tell me more? Or asking one of my mentors to, like, could you connect me with this person because I know they were one of your students, can you tell me, I'm interested in what they're doing. So a lot of emails like that and Zoom chats have happened in that way in the past 2 years. So I think I'm going to echo what everybody just said, is like, don't be afraid to reach out to people, but also because it can be, as an undergrad, a little bit intimidating to do that, feel free to use your career center, your professors to help you make that first connection, because it can be a little bit intimidating if it's the first time you're doing it. So I would say, don't be afraid to sort of reach out to the people that are the closest to you professionally to help you sort of reach out to people who are sort of in their broader networks.
So we can move on to the next question. It's kind of going off of what everyone's been saying, but what advice do you have for graduating students in the sciences based on your job search experience in general, and then based on your industry? So there are any like job boards you've used to search for jobs, or any advice you have for students who might not know like exactly what position they want? So how did you go about doing that, I guess, through your experience?
I can start. I fully recommend informational interviews. A lot of times what happens is that when you do a job search, you may find jobs that sound interesting, but you want to know more. And it is always good to find someone in that organization who you can actually talk to. If you don't feel comfortable, you personally doing that, hopefully by this point you have a mentor, you have someone who you can talk to and make recommendations for you or connect you. And the whole purpose of connecting is not to say you're going to get this job. It's for you as the individual to be the searcher of information, to have that curiosity. But in addition to that, it's not just learning about that other person, it's learning what that particular organization is looking for. An example is one person I knew was looking at CDC. She was extremely interested in doing work on the development of diseases, but the virtual development of diseases. So understanding spatially where it's at and what is happening. And given that, she was able to interview someone, but then eventually was able to get an internship at CDC, which is now, because she had that internship, she was able to publish with the people that she was working with, which has helped her in the process of getting a job. So anything you can do as an individual to show, one, you feel strong enough in yourself to search, to talk, to ask. You are assertive enough to say, this is a task that's just difficult for me. I need to learn this computer language in order to solve that problem, and be out there doing the work to move forward. And then to take all that you've had and to work with others as a team to create the best product for the organization. So the whole process itself is where I would tell people to go and really just put yourself out there and to feel very comfortable with yourself in talking and working with people who are new to you.
I would echo that and just say that a lot of people look at your character and your work ethic or your attitude or your curiosity more so than they look at, 50 years of experience in a particular field. And so definitely be confident in the skills that you have learned, but also be honest about, potential shortcomings or where you could learn, and how, working at a certain place, working with certain people would benefit not only your training, but your education. And I would say, like, for example, for me, my background is in neuroscience. And in fact, I completely despised anything to do with genetics and immunology. And yet I am now in a lab that focuses on vaccine research, immunology through and through, genetic engineering. And so while you're under an academic roof, whether you're in your undergraduate degree or whether you're in a master's or PhD program, I would just urge you to explore and try everything possible. Take classes that you may think you're not interested in, but just do it for fun, because you don't know where you're going to end up, what you may end up enjoying, or where that's going to take you. I found that my path has very rarely been like a linear trajectory. I've bounced around even between fields where I was in journalism, I was in entrepreneurship, I was in policy, I was in science, but those all combined in this really unique way in that, the work that I'm doing now touches on every single one of those interests. So don't be afraid to just jump in, try everything, because at the end, it'll all accumulate to something really special that you're going to enjoy for the rest of your life.
I want to echo everything that's been said so far, and especially the informational interviews, I think is huge. And I think it's also a lot less intimidating when it's an informational interview, because it's more of a conversation that you're having with someone. And that's ultimately how I got the job. I didn't expect to get a job offer going into this informational interview. I was really just getting information. And then they said, well, we need some help now. Do you want to start full part-time? And I ended up starting part-time. And this type of job, they would typically look for people graduating with public policy degrees or political science, not someone with biology and bioethics. But it was really that informational interview that I made that impression and showed my ability and just my, strengths and, differences that I could bring to a health policy firm that still works with organizations interested in things like biology and bioethics. So I would say, don't have such a narrow or too strict of an idea of what you want to do, and just be open to maybe taking a turn or switching your path. Because I thought I was going to go to medical school probably all 4 years until my spring semester of senior year of college, where I said, I don't want to do this. And so then I took time and I was a medical assistant for a while. And then what did click for me and was when I took a bioethics course at American. That was when I was like, wow, this is like everything I'm interested in, the literature, the work, everything. This is what I like, combines all my interests. And so I stuck with that, found master's programs. And then even in my grad program, I felt pressure. Should I enter a PhD program right away? Should I just keep going? But I had a person in my master's program who turned 50 years old. So I think another thing is just you have time. You have time to figure it out. And I think Cathy's a great example of that. You will figure it out eventually, and you'll have many experiences that will lead you ultimately to what you want to do. And you just need to be open to that and open to having a lot of conversations with a lot of different people.
To offer sort of a different perspective a little bit, specifically for grad school, I think and in physics, for example, there's a lot of resources and websites that are tailored for undergrads to find jobs, to find like sort of opportunities to go to grad school. So for example, the American Physical Society, which is the central sort of organization of our field, has this whole career page on their website that sort of connects you with a lot of people and shows you sort of all the interesting paths that you can sort of embark on with a physics degree. So I think looking at those resources can give you ideas of things to explore as well. And for grad school, I would say that informational interviews also happen for grad school. So once you sort of have this list of a few schools you're interested in, you actually want to talk to those people, understand the culture in this school, the department, the research group. So you get to have those conversations as well. So talk to people is kind of the theme, it seems so far. So I think, yeah, talk to as many people as possible, because you never know sort of where that might lead you.
So before we move on to the next question, I just want to remind the attendees to please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll be reading those towards the end. So I guess this question is more focused on your individual industries. So what preparation or skill sets are necessary for opportunities or positions in your industry?
I can start with that one. I'm still a student, so I use the exact same skills set you've been building all throughout your undergrad. I think the one skill set that really, really becomes important is time management and effective communication, writing and verbally. Like, these are skills that just become more and more important as you move forward with your career. So you're developing them now, but as you move forward, they become really even more important. So I would say I use the same sort of tool set that I used in undergrad. I just developed that more and become more efficient and better at these things. I think also the one thing that is sort of not skill set, but it's important, and it was mentioned before, is I truly believe that you can sort of teach anybody new skills, the technical skills, but the one thing that's hard to teach someone is like character and values. So work ethic, sort of you're like, if you believe in like DEI issues and all of these things that are really important these days, these are things that are part of who you are that are really hard to develop as you sort of move forward. So like if you invest time to think about what your values are, this is also an important sort of tool to have in your toolbox as you move forward.
I'd like to add adaptability, flexibility to that list. I think the pandemic was a great example of, people who were able to adapt to changes in their work environments and their personal lives. And that's true, regardless. You need to be able to work with different people. You need to be able to, work on different projects, be able to balance your work life, your personal life. So adaptability, I think, is a huge one. General open-mindedness, which I think, everyone has touched on a bit. I'd also say to get a little more specific into the sciences, I think everyone at AU is very uniquely positioned in that they can have one-on-one time with their professors and with the people doing research. I was working with Dr. Wade Kothman when I was at AU, and I was better prepared than anyone in my PhD cohort because I had that one-on-one time to discuss every aspect of the project, to participate in every aspect of the project, whether it was, this technical skills such as, immunohistochemistry, imaging on the confocal microscope, or if it was discussions about, okay, how do you formulate a specific problem? How do you, generate a hypothesis from the questions that you're asking? And that has helped me throughout my entire, the last 3 years in my PhD. And I was ahead of everyone by about 2 years because I had that unique opportunity to work one-on-one. So definitely take advantage of your professors, of your teachers, of, doing research at AU. And then the last thing I would add is learning when to take a step back and when to say no. I think, I'm someone who I'm 23 and I don't think I have enough time to do everything I want to do. And I've always had this grand plan of I'm retiring by 30. So I'm always on the run. And I had to learn in some very hard ways to say, you know what, this is me spreading myself out too thin. I'm not going to say yes to every opportunity that comes my way. Being able to tell my PI or, my employees, I'm taking this weekend to myself to reflect, to recoup, and so that I'm more productive, more efficient in the weeks to come. So just knowing yourself, knowing what your stress points are, being able to say no to people, I think is a very valuable skill to have.
So Irina, you took the words out of my mouth. That was going to be the first thing I said, like know how to say no and also advocate for yourself. I think that's huge, especially if you're starting off in a role that's more entry level and you may get a lot of work piled on and you think you have to say yes because you want to prove yourself and you need to show that you're a hard worker and everything. But you, like you said, you don't want to stretch yourself too thin. And if you need to say no, I'm sure anyone who's here, they have a very good reason for why they're saying no. So just make sure you advocate for yourself and you check in with yourself. And when you are able to say no, when you say yes, you'll be able to give much more of your time and your effort into those yeses. So I think that's huge. And that's a huge skill to learn too. It's hard when you're so used to saying yes and taking on a lot of things. So definitely with that.
I really have enjoyed listening to what everybody has to say. I think it's great. For me, it's one of the skills that a couple skills that I think are so important. One, everyone here is intelligent and capable, but it's the ability to learn. It is the ability to self-learn. It's the ability to know what you know and what you don't know and what you need to know. But then on top of it, I'm focusing in the area of statistics. The people who I have talked to who are the upper echelon in statistics, it's yes, there will always be people who know more than you or you know more than them in different areas, but nobody knows everything. However, I'm a generalist, and I have to say one of the best things about being a generalist is you just know a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you have the soft skill. And to me, soft skills are what's important. A soft skill is something about seeing the whole. So you see the whole picture of the project. You may not be able to break all the trees down as separate, but you can see the project as a whole. And by seeing the whole, you can learn to break down the parts. But in addition to that, when you look at any particular project, you have people who may be engineers, you may have people who are scientists, you may have mathematicians, you may actually have a psychologist. So you're going to have even a journalist. But do you have the ability to see enough of the whole and explain the different aspects to different people who have those different mindsets? That is a skill unto itself that is highly valued, because it's the ability to put an entire picture together so that the final product can be the best that you can create at that time. So I fully agree with everyone in terms of everything that you have said, and I think it's fabulous. I just wanted to add some different pieces.
So the next question I have is, what is your work environment like? How did you navigate entering the workplace, working with other people, and just learning, how to navigate your industry, basically?
So I'll start. I've been virtual work from home this entire time. I just started last year, but typically in this type of lobbying firm, we have an office very close to Capitol Hill, and we'd actually be going to Capitol Hill when the Capitol's open and going face to face with legislators and staffers, and having our groups come to DC and have advocacy days and meeting with a bunch of legislators. But that has completely shifted, and we do everything from a virtual landscape right now. So we're still doing those things and meeting with legislators and having those advocacy days and weeks, but it's all through a virtual setting. And in some ways, it's really effective because it's easier to meet with those offices. But in other ways, we lose some of that camaraderie and the connection that you get when you get everyone in one central location and feeling like that unified approach, so that we're all here advocating for the same thing. But I haven't experienced that myself, so I am excited to do that once we can. But so I would just say, reiterate that adaptability comment made earlier, that you may shift from being in person to virtual or some sort of a hybrid. And I've found that what you do in person, you can do virtually if you have the right tools and resources. So.
So I went straight to my PhD right after my bachelor's, and so the environment didn't change too much. But what I did learn was that even a PhD student can take on different roles within their research and within their lab. And so for me, going into the PhD, which I wasn't sure that I wanted to do at all, I went back and forth on whether I wanted to go into my PhD, go to med school, go to MBA programs. And so I actually applied to all three and just decided to see what would take. And I ended up in a clinical PhD program where I actually had to take the first 2 years of medical school And then I have to do research for my, dissertation. And this summer, I'm going to have to do, I think, 4 months of clinical rotation. So it's very much the best of both worlds, but ultimately I end up with an engineering degree. And so I was happy to have found that, because I discovered that I actually really don't like basic research. And I didn't like the idea of sitting at a bench and pipetting all day. And that was very much what I was doing in the first lab that I joined during my PhD. What I didn't know was that was only one type of PhD student, that if you enjoyed bench work, if you enjoyed basic research, you could very much take on that role. Now in this second lab that I'm in, I've taken the role of more of like the strategist and, the higher level thinking of my project, where obviously I do anything that's proprietary to my project at the bench, but I actually outsource everything else. And so I have people run my immunohistochemistry. I have people run my ELISAs. I have people doing behavioral tests on my mice for me. And it's my job to coordinate them all to one cohesive project. And so it was just an interesting process to learn that you can take different roles, even within, a PhD, even within an academic program, and just finding what you like, where you think your skills could be most useful. For my company, we actually started remote. When the company was started, I was already working with people in California, Texas, Detroit, DC, of course. And so it was a really easy transition for us when the pandemic started, because we were already working remotely anyways. What did change is that every month I was driving to DC to Fort Detrick, because we have partnership with the Army, and that had to change. Everything went virtual. It was a lot more difficult to get into hospitals and try to work with patients in person because everything shut down. But just as Kira said, with the right people, with the right tools, with the right resources, it can be done virtually. And if anything, you can probably be more efficient virtually. So, learn to adapt and work between both, and also, try to find out what people prefer. I'm usually pretty introverted, so I actually like being on Zoom and being able to have my schedule planned out with back-to-back calls on Zoom. It's a little more comfortable for me. I have my dog next to me. And so, get to know what people prefer and how they work best in these sorts of work environments.
So I started the sort of my PhD program during the pandemic, so fall 2020. And I think it was very challenging at the beginning to get to know my peers and my research team, and transitioning to this new place, and everything was over Zoom, and I could do my research over Zoom and my classes and everything, but it was honestly quite hard. And I think until now we have a very different work culture, because all my cohort started during this weird time. I think one thing that we did, then we were intentional about, is sort of set regular meter where we were a little bit more social, and set those Zoom social calls to get to know a little bit your peers. So that's what we tried to do. But I think up until today, we're still trying to figure out how to navigate this now hybrid world. And so I don't think we figured it out, and I think it's still a challenge. And it's I think my cohort has a very different vibe because of sort of the weird time we started, and up until now, we have a very different dynamic than any of the previous cohort in my sort of program. So I think I don't have a good answer, because we're still trying to figure it out. That's what I'm gonna say.
So
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Kath. I was going to ask the next one, but go ahead.
That's all right. I think everything that has been said has been wonderful. So I'm happy for you to go on to the next question.
Okay, so I do have one more question, and then we're going to be moving on to the Q&A from the audience. So if you haven't already submitted a question you have, feel free to do so. So the last question I had is, are there any lifestyle choices that you've made to be successful in your field? How do you balance a career and personal life?
Well, I can say that for me, I have not had much of a problem in balancing my career and my personal life. My personal life at this particular time, my gosh, I have to say that most of the things that I have decided to do, I do on a volunteer basis. And I started actually volunteering, wow, 10, 12 years ago. And I was volunteering because I could not get the skills that I wanted to learn from my job. And actually, so I do a lot of volunteer work through the American Statistical Association. And the main thing that I have volunteered with is called Statistics Without Borders, which is an outreach committee of the American Statistical Association, which provides pro bono services to nonprofits or organizations that cannot afford a statistician. And the more that I volunteered, the more I understood and have heard, there are a lot of people who gain a great deal of satisfaction in their jobs. And there are a lot of people who, after 10, 15 years of working in your job, you do it because of financial security, but you're not completely satisfied. And yet volunteering allows you to stretch your mind and your opportunities to actually gain skills that you can't gain in the office, either because of the structure or the environment or the tasks that you're being asked to do, whatever it is. And I have found that by expanding yourself, taking some of your personal time to actually reach out to some level of passion that you have, you will find that you are a better person at your job because you're happier. But in addition to that, you can learn some of these skills. So for example, I learned the major soft skill of seeing the big picture. I then had the opportunity to actually run an organization for 4 years. And by running that organization, it helped me tremendously to understand how different parts of an organization work together. And from that, now my job is that I actually teach people the soft skills and help them with the soft skills. So my volunteer work has evolved to become something I really do have a passion for.
So I can speak to more just day-to-day balance. Just like you honor the meetings you have for work, or you honor your schedule, honor those times that you schedule yourself for working out, for doing the cycling class, for doing yoga, whatever it is. You should put just as much weight into that, because those are the things that keep you in check with yourself and keep you balanced and keep you feeling energized to go do those work things or do those other things that you have to do. And this kind of goes back to when to say no. Like, it may not seem so important, but if it is important to you, and if you know doing this will help you be better when you show up for work, then I think you should do it. So don't ever feel bad about, putting yourself first or putting your mental health first in particular situations. So
I'm terrible at managing the balance between my personal life and my career. I wake up at 4 a.m. I get to bed by 10 p.m. and I could work for that entire time. So I have to actually schedule blocks of time that says, okay, Irena, this is your gym time. This is your sit down and stare at the wall time. And I had to be very strict with myself and say, okay, Saturdays are me day. I turn my phone off. I tell everyone that I work with, unless it's an absolute emergency, do not contact me. I will not be answering emails. I'm not working. This is my time to, just I don't know, put a mask on my face and watch a silly show, or I like riding horses. And so I'll go to the barn and spend all day outside on Saturdays. But, I'm one of those people that just had to schedule it out. And when the pandemic hit, it got even worse because I found out that I could be so much more efficient at home. And so my schedule got even more packed. And so I had to tell myself, okay, every morning for an hour, go for a run or take the dog out. In fact, my dog is probably the biggest reason I was able to find some free time for myself, because she needed to be let out. She needed to go and, play ball in the park. And so, yeah, just be very strict with yourself about taking time for yourself, getting off the grid, getting off electronics, doing things that you enjoy, finding activities that you enjoy. And then finding people who can support you along that path too. I think, especially with working from home, it's really, really easy to isolate yourself. And I'm definitely a good example of that. I am now on Bumble BFF, just trying to meet people, because it became very difficult with everyone working from home, no one being able to go to social events, people being afraid to either communicate with each other or being in close contact with each other. And so, just like we were saying about networking and cold calling people, don't be afraid to do that in, your personal life and in your friendships as well, because you never know who you're going to meet or who you can relate to, especially through a time like this.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. Like, I'm also someone who likes to plan out things and use my calendar a lot, and schedule everything out. And I think this helps me find some type of harmony, and that harmony between personal and professional shifts with life changes and transitions and seasons of life as well. So that will shift and change, will never look the same throughout your career. But I think the calendar sort of grounds me and helps me to find time for everything. The other thing I would also echo is finding your support system, the different people who play a different role in your life, different parts of your identity, whether it's your professional or personal one. Sort of different people will play a different role in supporting you, and you should make sure you reach out to them and sort of make sure you have that support system that helps you sort of move forward, because we're sort of created to connect with people. Even if we're introverted, we still need sort of this social connection. So everybody in your life will play a different role, and make sure sort of you connect and have those different people who sort of help you sort of move along and empower you in your career path.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to pass it on to Talia now. She's going to read out some of the questions in the Q&A.
Hi, thank you all so much for answering the questions so far. We have a few questions from the audience. Not like everyone has to answer all of them, so just whoever wants to answer each one. The first one we have is, does anyone have any advice for a student who would know like the kind of field they want to go into but are having trouble figuring out what specific thing they want to study within that field?
For me, quite honestly, I was the same way after I had completed my master's degree in statistics. I literally had no idea what area I wanted to go into at all. And the person who was my mentor at American University, that's Dr. Gray, and she introduced me to, it was the American Association for the Advancement of Science On-Call Scientists. And then she also introduced me to a nonprofit, which was called StatAid at the time. And in both situations, I actually just volunteered my time. And in each situation, I worked on a particular project, and each project only lasted, oh my gosh, 6 months or so. And it wasn't a full-time volunteering. But what it did is it gave me an idea of different fields within my field. And that to me is what helped expand my knowledge and idea of where I wanted to go. It didn't cost me any money. It only cost my time and me actually going out and doing something that I was uncomfortable at first in doing. And I did a variety of different short volunteer stints with the federal government and with other nonprofits. And I just, by reaching out and doing all those different things that people didn't pay me, but I just gave my time, it really helped expand my idea of what was out there, where my passions were, and helped me kind of figure out a path that I wanted to follow.
Okay, next question is for Irina specifically. Someone asked if you could speak more about the type of clinical PhD program that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it's organized, so it's a partnership between MIT and Harvard Medical, and you ultimately get an engineering degree from MIT and then like a certificate of completion or certificate of attendance of Harvard Medical School. And so what I had to do was I had to take a very abridged version of 2 years worth of medical school classes, while also taking my 4 core engineering classes in my chosen concentration, which was neuroscience. But the idea is to get both an education in kind of hard technical, sciences. There are people who chose to focus on mechanical engineering, bioengineering, computer science, but then also understand the perspective of, inside the hospitals from the clinicians, patient care. And so that when you go into your research, when you're pursuing whatever engineering discipline you decide to pursue, you have the kind of practical, clinical, or translational approach in mind. And then you have to go into clinical rotations for about 4 months, where your research is put completely on hold and you join the medical students and you're essentially acting as an intern. And so, things that I had to do that I didn't think I'd do in a PhD program was I had to do an autopsy on an Alzheimer's patient. I had to conduct heart surgery on pigs. And these were all super unique experiences because having that engineering background, I could see, oh, these are the problems that clinicians are struggling with. These are the problems that hospitals, have to tackle on a day-to-day basis. How can I now apply my education to help fix that? And so I think it was a very unique, it's been a very unique program because it really just touches on my interest in being more clinical, being more translational. Even now, as I'm doing, more basic research with vaccine development, I still have to work with clinicians and technicians to run clinical trials and preclinical trials with mice, with monkeys. We have some studies in the hospitals with patients. And so it's really, that's kind of the heart of the PhD program, is the clinical aspect of it. Yeah, I think that's kind of the general overview, but I'm happy to answer any other specific questions about it later.
Thank you. Someone else asked, how has being a woman in STEM influenced your career?
So since I'm more in the health policy world, pretty much the only woman in my office. There may be one other person, she's an intern. So it definitely, I shifted from a graduate program that was mostly women and a field of study that bioethics, medical humanities, mostly women are in there. And then I shifted into a role where it's definitely male dominated and definitely white male dominated. So it's interesting navigating that, but luckily I'm in a firm that we work with a lot of health disparities and historically Black medical schools and health profession schools. So even though like we are in this world, we're hearing from the voices of people whose voices aren't heard so much. So I think just being a woman in science, like you learn ways in which you can leverage more underrepresented voices, and also while leveraging your own in kind of a male dominated field. And I think this goes back to advocating for yourself. Just always feel sure of yourself and be assertive as much as you can. You know, I go through my day writing emails, then backspace, 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 because I'm being a little too nice or saying maybe, or, you know, putting exclamation points. And, you know, just be as assertive and sure of yourself, because you deserve to be in the rooms that you are, and always remember that. So that's what I would say.
I definitely agree with that. I've had to become way more assertive, way more outspoken. Same thing with the emails. There've been, I've had to take out the words just or I think, out of my vocabulary entirely. And I'm working kind of between STEM and also in the business realm. And as the face of my company, I'm always pitching to investors who happen to be predominantly older white men. And I've had way too many terrible experiences with them, in that, I've had investors ask me, well, you're in science, you're a young woman, are you the next Elizabeth Holmes? Or, what's going to happen if you want to raise a family one day? Is your company going to plummet? Is your PhD just going to disappear? I've had people tell me that they think I should join one of those camps that make me look and sound more masculine because I can't be a woman at the face of my research or at the face of my company. And so it's really pushed me to stay true to my values, to stay true to my morals, just, not backing down and, speaking your truth, being confident in yourself, and not letting anyone get in your way, and not compromising yourself in the process. I've had so many people tell me, if you just hired a man to do this, or if you just worked with a male researcher, it'd be quicker, it'd be more efficient, you'd get more interest, the research would be better. And while it has taken me a longer time to prove myself because of that, I'm much prouder of myself. I'm much more well respected because I was able to do it myself as a woman. So my word of advice for any woman in STEM is just stay true to your values.
Thank you. Someone else asked if you could discuss the intersectionality between science and social issues or humanities in your careers.
I laugh at that question only because that's exactly what statistics is. Statistics is a science, it's a math, and the wonderful thing about statistics is it's used in almost every field now. And the great thing is being able to know that even if you are in a field, human rights, the psychology, the sociology, the anthropology, that statistics actually helps explain what you are working on. And I'm more than happy to go in more depth with some of those different observations. But there definitely is an intersection. I think both areas complement each other tremendously. Because even if you're in the STEM, what was it? Was it Kara? Was it you who made a comment that you had a journalism background, or was it Kara who made that comment? And having that skill, that it really helped you. So I do think that both fields, both areas work together so very well.
And I'll just say, being in the health policy side, pretty much everything in our field does influence, social policy, experiences of individuals. And then also our larger culture and our society influences our sciences for who gets the opportunities, who are in the rooms, and kind of the pipeline programs. So there are a lot of ways, I think, every part of healthcare and science, they are all intersected and they all impact each other, and they can all encourage and enforce each other. So I think it's always important to take that step back and think about how your field is interacting with social humanities and social sciences, because it may interact in ways that you may not realize. And for me, I'm kind of always thinking about how will this one policy change, or this one change in the language, how will it have a greater impact on who it affects and whose lives may be, you know, partly impacted or improved by this. And I think we can see that in hospitals, we can see that in the way our medical system interacts with each other and the way it works. So we can see how the system fails some groups and how it helps some groups. So I think it's always important to even think about those ways and think about how your industry or your field or your role is somewhat playing a part in affecting the social sciences, public health, and all of that.
Thank you. Another question we have is if anyone did research in undergrad and if they have any tips in getting involved in research as an undergrad.
Just ask. Just walk up to anyone and ask. I showed up to my very first biology class with Dr. Kothman, and his first slide was about his background, and I thought it was interesting. I knew nothing about neuroscience. I knew nothing about the retina, which is what we were working on. But I liked his attitude, I liked his class, and I came up to him afterwards on the very first day and I said, "Hi, my name is Irina. I want to do research with you. Please train me." And he was hesitant at first, said he didn't have much time, and I just kept coming back. And eventually I ended up doing a summer research project with him and then continued to work with him for the remainder of my undergraduate career. So don't be afraid to just walk into people's offices and ask. I think people at AU are especially willing to help, to train, to offer their support. And if they can't do it themselves, they'll always have someone in their lab or a colleague to refer you to.
Yeah, and another way is just emailing. I'm always a proponent of that. I looked at, when I was at AU, I basically went to the College of Science website, looked in the biology department and read bios. I looked at all the professors, and even if I didn't have a class with them, I just read what their research interests are, what they're doing at AU. And then I was sparked an interest in Dr. DeSico Skinner's lab for squamous cell carcinoma. So I had an uncle who had skin cancer, and I was very interested in that type of science at the time. So I just emailed her and told her that I had a personal interest in it. And she said, you know, I usually wouldn't take someone I hadn't had in class before, but you know what, because you have that interest, and I reached out to her, she allowed me to start in her lab. And I worked in there from I think the second semester of my freshman year, all throughout my time at AU. And I even got, you know, a grant award through her program. And it was really beneficial. And she wasn't the only person I emailed though, too. I emailed a few who did, some of them say, similar to you, Irina, with the first response, "Oh, I don't have space, I don't have time." And that's okay. You just move on to the next one. And you just keep doing that until you get it, or you keep going back. So be persistent.
And to add to just a little bit to that, I would say also ask the professors who are like not in STEM fields as well. Sometimes doing a summer project in a completely different field, something you have no idea about or no sort of not a lot of background on, can be really interesting and can be really informative and transformational as well. And the cool thing, as an undergrad, your research projects will be bounded by a time period of some kind. So there's like gonna be either a semester or 2 semester sort of timeline, and that's pretty nice. So you can try it out, know that it's not gonna last long if you don't really like it, and try out as much as possible. So I think also just not sort of limiting yourself to the sciences, because there's a lot of cool research that happens at AU. So
An independent reading project is also another example of that. And I think an interesting leeway to hands-on research, because then you can actually, you create a personal relationship with the professor through these discussions, through the readings. And so you really learn about your communication styles and your approaches to research, which I think sets a really nice foundation for then doing research with them in the lab. So don't overlook independent reading as well.
So at some point, some of you, probably all of you actually, had to consider to at some point to either apply for jobs with the education you've had so far, or to pursue like graduate degrees. And I just wanted to know, how did you like make those decisions about what to do with those points?
I can start. I had different careers. When I was teaching, I was a public school teacher, and my pay was based upon not just the number of years that I taught, but my level of education. And so I decided to go back and do a master's degree. And my first master's degree was at George Mason, Philosophy of Religion, Women's Studies. And I did that because it was so general. I thought it was the only thing that could hold my attention. And so that's how I got started with it. But it was so general. And then I did a research project with that master's degree. And the research project was really comparing education standards and how, and the certain meetings at schools at different demographics at schools. And I saw the amount of discrimination that was there, and that led me into a field of statistics. But then in terms of a job, as I said, I literally had no idea where I wanted to go. And it was through the volunteering that actually helped me learn connections and gain experience and curiosity that led to my other jobs.
So for me, graduating with a biology degree, I felt like there wasn't much I could do with just a BS in biology, unfortunately. So I immediately was thinking about grad school, but I wasn't sure exactly the route I wanted to take. But I knew I had an interest in bioethics. I knew I had that interest in the humanities and the philosophy side of combining with biology. So I just started investigating different programs, master's programs. There are some PhD programs in bioethics. And there are also several dual degrees in public health and bioethics. So I also looked into that. That was initially what I was interested in, but then I shifted into just doing the master's program. But I think going to grad school, it can help you figure out the area that you want to go into as well. So if you can go into a more broad grad school program and you have the ability to do so, you have the means to do so, it helped me figure out what exactly I wanted to do. I never thought I would be in the health policy world ever. I never thought that would be for me, but through my grad school, I saw that there were different avenues, and I saw how I could take my strengths and my education and apply it in that way. So I think, staying open and just kind of really taking time to think about what you are actually interested in. And then once you identify your interests, you can say, okay, now what fields or what jobs or what kind of roles look into these interests and look at different perspectives of getting at those interests. So if you have an interest in health disparities, for example, you can go through a lot of different routes, a lot of different positions that will address those. You can do the research route, policy route, even become a doctor in an underserved area. So there are a lot of different routes you can take if you can identify your interests. And I think just exploring those different routes is important throughout your job search.
Similarly to the biology degree, graduating with a neuroscience degree, I knew that if, my only option afterwards was a post-bac fellowship or becoming a tech in some lab. And when I was an undergrad, I did a summer project as an Amgen scholar at Harvard, and I was working with some of these techs, and I saw that their day-to-day schedule was the same over and over and over again. And that was when I knew, I was like, okay, I know I need to pursue some kind of higher degree or go into industry, because I wasn't going to be happy doing the same thing every day. I needed the variety. I needed some sort of chaos. And I've been motivated to kind of find my freedom. And whenever I looked into any kind of position, what kind of job I might want, what kind of higher degree I might want to pursue, it's always keeping that freedom in mind, the freedom of thought, the financial freedom, the freedom to try different projects, new experiences, maybe travel. In fact, being in a PhD, this is my I'm finishing up my third year now, and it's probably the longest I have ever stayed in one place, and it's driving me mad. And so I really appreciate having, this startup environment that I'm working in, because it's been able to help me balance, kind of the more methodical work, often more tedious, the long haul with the PhD research, while, focusing on the more chaotic, ever-changing environment of a startup culture. And so, for me, it was just finding the appropriate people, finding the appropriate lab that would allow me to balance both, or allow me to explore a little more, rather than, for example, working with a postdoc on something that they wanted to work on, but rather be a little more independent and having the flexibility to pursue my own projects and to be able to transition to other projects when I please.
For me, I think it was trial and error, I would say. I thought thinking back, senior year undergrad, I knew that I wanted to go to grad school. I applied to a lot of PhD programs, didn't get in any of them. Didn't take that very well, but after that, I sort of, until like graduation day, May 2018, I had no idea where I was going next. I was going to go back home. But in my last month, I applied to this master's program, and I ended up knowing that I got in like a few days after graduation, and that's where I ended up going. So to be completely honest, I don't have a good answer, because I think it's trial and error, and seeing when I start something, if it moves me and interests me, I just keep going. So I would say that, especially as an undergrad, you don't really I don't know, most people haven't figured out what they really like or what they're really passionate about. So you have to try a lot of things and be okay with failure and rejection. And that's really hard to accept and sort of deal and manage. So I would say, just try different things out, and it's okay if you don't like the first job you get. It's okay if you don't like grad school and decide to change. If you go to grad school, startup program, research group, you don't like that, you can switch. There's always different paths you can take. And I think for me personally, I think I'm still exploring exactly what my path is. And I keep going with the flow a little bit. I like designing a lot of things and planning my life, but also going with what moves me the most is kind of how I decide what to do next. And I think it has taken a long time to sort of accept that sometimes I can't plan everything and I can't have it all figured out, and that's okay. Just like keep moving forward.
So I think we are at our end of our session here, and we want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we really want to, from the bottom of our hearts, and Mia and Talia here as well, on behalf of Women in Science, we really want to say thank you for taking the time out to share your insights with our undergraduates. And it's just always always a thrill for us to bring some alumni back and show that support, because it's so important, especially now. You hear the questions on COVID and your experiences. So it's been really, really phenomenal. So thank you so much. And I hope we can stay connected. Mia, Talia, you want to say anything?
No, it was really great. Thank you so much for everyone who volunteered to be a panelist. I definitely learned a lot, and this event's always great. So thank you.
Thank you to the
Yeah,
Career
thank you so
Center.
much.
Thank you so much. So I think we kind of have the same message, supporting so much what you've said about networking and informational interviews and being flexible and looking at your experience as a journey and valuing that journey, and just wanted to encourage all attendees, our students, to use Career Center services. We have wonderful services, resources for you, and individual advising appointments where we can talk to you individually about your interests and values and your hesitations and concerns, and take time to figure out kind of the plan of action that will work individually for you. And what we have at AU, I think a wonderful benefit that your Career Center, there's no expiration on your Career Center services benefits. So you can meet with us right now when you are in school, and we would love to do that, to connect early when you are still in school. But when you graduate, at any point of your career development, you can always use Career Center services and individual advising appointments. So we'll very much encourage you, and would love to see you either on Zoom, or we are open now, or in the Career Center, which is in the Butler Pavilion, 5th floor, 2 floors above the campus store. So thank you.
Okay, I think we'll formally call the session to an end, and I'm gonna take the liberty here to stop the recording. So I wish you all the